Welcome to the Thriving Leaders podcast, where we dive into real conversations that help leaders grow, teams flourish, and organisations thrive. I'm your host, Claire Gray, Leadership and Team Facilitator at Thriving Culture. I'm also the author of Thriving Leaders, Learn the Skills to Lead Confidently, and Thriving Teams, When Teams Unite, Align and Achieve. This podcast is filled with practical tools, tips, actions, and insights that you can immediately apply so you can lead confidently. I interview thought leaders from across the globe. I hope you enjoy the podcast. If you've ever found yourself moving too fast, reacting to everything, or struggling to create space you need to lead well, this conversation with Digby Scott will feel like a deep breath. Digby brings a grounding, honest perspective on what it really means to lead in a way that is sustainable, spacious, and deeply human. In this episode, we explore ideas like unhurried productivity, leading lasting impact, understanding the systems we operate in, and shifting from hero to host. You'll hear practical examples, beautifully simple tools, and questions you can take straight back into your team. Let's get into it. So today's guest is someone who doesn't just talk about leadership. He lives it, he breathes it, and he also helps others do it in a way that really lasts. Digby Scott is a leadership coach, a speaker, facilitator, author, and host of the Dig Deeper podcast. He's worked across sectors and continents, guiding senior leaders and teams to grow with clarity, courage, and integrity. His superpower, creating high trust, deep learning environments where people feel stretched, supported, and seen. He's also the author of 2 books, Changemakers and Out There, and he's known for making complex ideas feel deeply human and totally doable. So Digby, I'm so glad to have you on this podcast.
Thank you. It's funny hearing all of those things because right now I feel like my superpower is finding space to get on the ocean and just go and play. It feels like something that we don't kind of often share as professionals, do we? Like this other bit of our life. And I reckon for me to do the work I do, I reckon I'm pretty good at creating space for myself. And so I'm looking out the ocean right now in this beautiful spot I'm in, and I'm like, this is an essential part of how to lead and how to live is to create the space, right? And not just wait till Christmas. We're recording this just before Christmas, right? Not just wait until then until we do that. So yeah,
Yeah,
I'll just add that into my bio, shall I?
I think you should. How do you do it? Like, I feel like I admire you from afar in terms of your life by design. You showed me the view. Obviously, our listeners won't necessarily be able to see it, but you showed me the view before of this beautiful beach and this picturesque environment you're in. So, how do you create the space for your own learning and your own, I guess, work?
I reckon it's a commitment to myself and the purpose that I reckon I'm here for, which is, as you mentioned, the work purpose at least is around transforming how leaders lead. And you got to live that. Years ago, if your listeners know my story, you'll have heard this before, but for those of you who haven't, I experienced a really major burnout. I was national manager of a recruitment company and I was in over my head, and I just thought, put the foot down, keep going, suck it up. That's how you get through things. And of course, the world has other ideas, and so did my body. And I just collapsed in a heap, essentially. I didn't have a nervous breakdown, but it was essentially a 5-year journey back to good.
Mhm.
And, it's that sort of experience that I think we don't want that to be the thing, the catalyst for other leaders to have to go through to go, you know what? No, there's actually a better way, a more sustaining way, a generative way to live and lead. But for me, that's what I had to go through to decide, you know what, I'm going to commit to a longer game that includes me putting myself and my energy management first. And you'll know this, right? We both run practices. It's critical to do that. Yet, what I also try to do, I guess, in some ways, model it for others to see what a different way is. And I think our corporate structures and systems are still not really reflecting this is how humans behave at their best. That's how they operate at their best. And so I'm sort of trying to be on the outside of the system, showing that actually there's different ways to deliver great performance and keep growing and learning. So I've gone beyond how do I do it? I'm talking about why I do it. But how I do it is actually learning how to say no and learning what I need and when I need it and designing my calendar to enable that to be part of it. Yeah. And then negotiating with other people around ensuring that it's not just me, it's also the people that I love and work with are getting what they need too.
It's such an interesting one. Like, I've had my business for 7 years and I'm still very much in this 9 to 5 mindset. I live in a beautiful place like Byron Bay. And even when I was this morning, it was very rare that I'll ride my bike in with the kids. My husband will ride the kids on their bikes to school. And one of my kids is on school holidays and the other one is not. And we had to go get some injections for us going to Japan. And then we did a couple of other things while we're in town. And it was such a beautiful morning. And I didn't get home until 11:15. And as I was riding back, I actually thought of you because I knew we were doing this podcast. And I was like, I should be doing this way more often, but it's so ingrained. Why do you think it's so ingrained in us? Like, obviously, I came from a corporate career and we don't want to hit this burnout point. We had Dr. Michelle McQuaid, who's done a lot of work on quiet cracking. And I like to think of it as the in-between. Apparently, there's a huge percentage of employees right now who are quietly cracking. So on the outside, they seem fine, but they're actually really on the verge of burnout. And you can go one way and be resilient and have grit and keep going, or you burn out. And it's like, how do we actually get this balance right?
Good question. I think at the heart of it's knowing your own system, meaning your body, your makeup, and learning about what you need to be your best and what triggers you. So there's a whole lot of know thyself there. I reckon that's got to be the start of it. You got to have that commitment to that. Yeah, at the same time, it's about, I was talking to a group last week about this, the next level out there and the teams level. It's the how I roll conversation. Like, how do you roll? What do you need to be at your best? And how do I enable and ensure that you have that to be able to have those conversations beyond the task stuff, beyond the here's what we're here for work, which is really important. It's also, and so for us to all thrive and to be at our best, how do we set up a team environment for that to work? My partner's she's a specialist in helping organizations get their act together around flexible work. And this is central to those conversations. She helps managers really learn how to have the conversations about so we can have a full, rich life and including work. How do we make this work at work? A lot of work's in that. Yeah, it's essential that we don't keep swinging the pendulum to just grit it out, because I think we know that. But I don't think we have an alternative narrative yet. I think the narrative that I'm living, that you're aiming to live as well, that's an outlier. I reckon we need to champion stories of this at a cultural level about how we do this. I was reading something, I'm in New Zealand, and I was reading something the other day about there's this big debate at the moment about do Kiwis take too much time off over summer, and this kind of like, we'll get back to work in February after a famously long take all of January off, but we really don't get back into proper work mode until March. And is that hurting our productivity as a nation? And yeah, I mean, I don't know what the data says about that, but there's something about work, and then you have a holiday at Christmas. And that's when you get to recover. It's like, well, we don't want to recover. We want to sustain and generate and keep going all through the year. And I don't think that story is there in our culture.
Yeah. I'm just about to take 6 weeks off. So I'm going back on the 2nd of February. So yeah, Friday's my last day. But I do think I'm a big believer in holidays and breaks. Like, I'm very good at breaks, like when I think about holidays, but maybe not about the micro breaks through the week. And I've also been experimenting with different things because I was sort of doing 10 weeks of sprints and then having school holidays off to be with the kids. But then I was cramming everything into 10 weeks and I was like, well, this is really exhausting.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like it's too much. Maybe that actually isn't the right way of doing it. And maybe it is having a 9-day fortnight or whatever it might be for me, like to work out what the right rhythm is. And I'm sure all of us kind of ponder this also as we get older and maybe our priorities change too.
I think there's a big case for experimenting and just trying stuff out and seeing what it does for you. I'm getting really deliberate about that as well. And it'll be different for different people. I think the other idea, and I'm wondering about this, is how do you redefine when work happens and when it doesn't? Because often I think there's this kind of on-off switch, which is a bit binary around work. It's like, I'm at work, so therefore I work. But man, if we're in any creative situation, any creative role like leadership, then your brain isn't off. Your brain can have brilliant ideas or come up with amazing questions at 3 in the morning on a Saturday. And so your brain will follow a different rhythm. And I think it's about, I was driving to where I'm now. It's a 5 hour drive from Wellington, where I live, to here. Now, do I say this is not work time? So I'm off and I just listen to music. Well, actually, no, I felt like listening to a few podcasts. So I did that. And I stopped and wrote a few notes. And it's, there's something about being able to give yourself permission to go, what's my best way of working? The idea of being, I'm a real integrator, so I don't mind working on a Sunday. If it's good surf on a Wednesday and I've got the space, I'll do that. Other people are what they call segmenters, which is more of like, no, I've got to have a clear boundary. And even with segmentation, there's still this idea that, well, actually, I could think of an idea, park it, come back to it, rather than try and be completely off and make it really rigid. I think that's, life is not rigid. Life is fluid.
And I think we need to go with that fluidity. And I think one of the things I find that I do is I fill a lot of my space and my time with podcasts or content or following people up on calls. And even the other week, I was going to do the lighthouse walk in Byron, and I got my earpods out, went to put them in, was working out my podcast, and I was like, you know what? I'm actually just going to walk, and left my phone and just walked. And I was like, "Oh, I think I need to do more of that." Like, just walk and listen to the birds and
Love
listen to the
it.
surround. But I tend to get into my productivity. Oh, well, I need to be efficient, need to be multitasking to get it all done. Yeah.
Yeah, there's this whole thing about, there's a coach called Jerry Colliner, and he has this lovely saying, we make meaning from motion. We get our meaning from being busy, essentially. And when we take away the motion, where's the meaning? And so there's this sort of like, when we're in motion, I'm productive and I'm doing things. And that can be exciting. So I'm walking, I'll listen to a podcast because that's productive, right? But if you stop and there's a story in our heads about, well, if I'm not busy, then I'm not productive. And I feel that's, again, in sort of anything to do with creative work, when we're working in spaces of complexity and messiness, we need to allow the space to stop and go, I'm just going to let the dust settle for a bit here and see what emerges. And it might not even be a cognitive process. It might let it all go for a bit. And you know what happens, right? When that happens, when you slow down and you just listen to the birds, your brain's still working. You just may not know it. And then out of the blue, there comes an idea or a solution or a new pathway forward. It's like, and yeah, we can give ourselves permission, which is exactly what you did. You gave yourself permission to go, you know what? Nah, I'm going to just simplify things. No, let it go for a bit. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, kind of catching ourselves to give ourselves space.
Yeah.
You used some language before that I wanted to pick up on when you talked about creativity and leadership together. And often creativity and leadership aren't always put together as capabilities. I'd love to kind of unpack how you see leadership being about creativity.
Creativity, to me, the word creative means to be able to bring into the world more of what you want to have or see. So
Mhm.
you're creating something. And if you think about leadership as a creative act, that's what we're doing. Leadership, by definition, is going where we haven't been before. We're leading into something new, something different, something changing. And we're asking others to come on that journey with us. So let's create together. To me, this idea of creating a path, creating a new vision, creating a future, creating a map to get there, it's all about creativity, as opposed to another word which has the same letters, which is reactivity. And reactivity is that trying to stay safe. It's playing defense rather than offense, even though I don't really like the word offense. It's playing lose. And the idea of reactivity is just dealing with and buffering away, pushing away, keeping in boxes, all of that stuff that is coming at us. That shift is, I think, fundamental for good leadership. This is not my language. I first came across this language from the Leadership Circle, Bob Anderson and colleagues, who've got a massive body of work on this idea of reactive leadership versus creative leadership. It really resonates with me, that language. Yeah, leadership at its heart is about imagining something different, a new future, seeing what is now, to be able to see the systems, the patterns, the people, the capabilities, the roadblocks, and then doing what it takes. So imagine, see, do. And I think of that as kind of like a circle or a cycle. And the creative part is in all of those, creating a vision, creating a picture, and then creating a plan. And then moving into like, oh, how do we do that well without not getting rid of fear, but it's more in spite of fear, having something that's more compelling than the bad things that might happen. Long answer to your question.
No, it's good because I think that a lot of leadership teams get caught up in this reactivity. Like they want to focus on the strategic priorities. They want to be able to reflect, plan, be intentional, but they're in firefighting mode a lot of the time and they become quite reactive. I know that you talk a bit about unhurried productivity. Is there a link between this reactivity and this unhurried productivity that you speak
I
of?
reckon so.
Yeah.
So unhurried productivity is essentially a saying that I've coined, a phrase I've coined, which essentially is about doing good work over time sustainably. So it's about being able to produce, and that might be produce great outcomes. It might be to produce new ways of thinking or doing or operating in a way that it has a virtuous cycle as opposed to a go, 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 crash sort of cycle. And the link between creativity and unhurried productivity to me is that ability to know how and when to slow down, to stop. And I reckon the practical side of that isn't actually just going on a yoga retreat. I mean, that might be useful, but I think it's the micro moments when shit happens and you're sitting around the leadership table. It's like, oh my God, we've got to deal with this now. And then there's another 10 things we've got to deal with. It's actually the micro moment to go and ask a different question rather than immediately just respond and go, well, that's a bad thing. We better get rid of that or sort that. It's like, so maybe a leader might ask, hang on, what would happen if we did nothing? What would happen if we didn't react to that? And just to be able to ask that question creates a different chain of thought. It's that ability to stop and go, how is this part of a larger pattern? And what if we address the pattern, not the symptom? And it's, again, that's an example of a good question. The leaders that I see are the most unhurriedly productive, have honed that skill of being able to just stop and go, wait. What's the bigger thing at play here? Is it, how does this make the boat go faster if we deal with this or not deal with this? What's the pattern at play that we really need to be paying attention to? What's this incident actually telling us about what's really going on? It's those questions that I think that allows that more creative approach to dealing with stuff and continuing to move forward. Does that make sense?
Oh, 100%. I think inaction is actually inaction, like not doing anything is
Love that.
actually
Yeah,
inaction.
cool.
And I think often another cliche, but we need to get on the balcony and look at the whole system of what's actually happening rather than being on the dance floor and just reacting and doing the thing, the action or the next step. So what I'm hearing is it's definitely about taking a systemic approach and asking curious questions to kind of challenge a team to not necessarily always go into the habitual way that we might actually react or respond to a situation.
Yeah, that's it. Exactly.
Yeah, awesome. I'm very keen to dig into a post I saw a little while ago on LinkedIn where you were talking about sustainable impact beyond tenure and what that actually looks like. What were some of the results from that survey and why were you asking the question?
That's a good one. Yeah. So some context for that. So I've been interested in that question about how do leaders lead with a mindset of beyond their tenure to have lasting impact. So I'm like, okay, this really matters, I think, because we get too short-term focused and then the leader leaves and things go back to how they were or they fall over or whatever. And so like, we need a more sustainable way of leading. I've been thinking about this idea of leading lasting impact as a sort of an idea, like unhurried productivity is an idea. Right? And I was like, okay, what do I call this thing, this program, this idea? What should I call it? Because when you give it a name, that's the thing that travels. And so I thought, well, I could call it leading lasting impact, but maybe I should call it legacy leadership because legacy seems to be like a word that people get. But I have an aversion to the word legacy. And I was having lunch with a friend and talking about it. And she said, I was going on about leading lasting impact. And she said, why don't you just call it legacy leadership? Because That's kind of what it is. And I went, anyway, so I thought, well, let's go and ask the audience. So I went to LinkedIn and I said, this is what I'm thinking of doing. This is important. What shall I call it? And I just did a poll. And it was leading lasting impact, legacy leadership. Either of those work. I think that was the third one, or other comment below. Had 126 votes over the course of a week. 60% of people voted for leading lasting impact. And another 32, I think it was, were legacy leadership. And it was, so yeah, the bulk of them were in those two and were their clear winner.
And it's interesting because, like, when I think about sustainable leadership, I would have gone down the legacy path too.
Why would that? Why would that
'Cause
be?
I think it's often with leadership teams, especially leadership teams that have long tenure within an organization, we might talk about, like, what's the legacy that we want to leave.
Mm.
But I have a hypothesis of why maybe leading lasting impact might have won. And I feel like maybe when we talk about leaving a legacy, it makes us feel old, or whereas I think when we talk about leading lasting impact, it feels more purpose driven.
Yes.
And I wonder whether that's why. So maybe I need to switch up the
I
questions I'm
really
asking
like this.
leadership teams. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, you're onto it. This is how I'm thinking about it too. And this is actually what was validated through the survey. So when I hear the word legacy, I don't actually think old. I think two things. One is it's about me, my legacy, right? And so it's kind of egocentric. So there's that kind of thing. Like, what will people say about me? Will I have a plaque on the wall somewhere kind of energy? So that's one thing that I get put off by. And the other one, which I hadn't thought about until I did the survey, which was in the tech sector in particular, legacy systems are the old broken ones, or the ones that are hard to maintain or whatever, right? So maybe there is that old thing coming through. And there was an aversion to that word. So essentially the word legacy carries quite a lot of baggage. Lasting impact, as you've said, it's more about the outcome. And the way I think about it, and was really helped with the comments in the survey, was it's not so much what people will say about me after I'm gone, but how will the lasting impact benefit those who come after or stay around? And so it's less about me and my ego, and it's more about the ecosystem that I'm serving. And it's how does that continue, not just to keep going, but to thrive. So whoever's a part of that ecosystem is going to benefit. And yes, I will have a contribution, yet that's not the point. And there's a lovely distinction in that to me, because I think when we're too hooked up on how do I make a difference and what are people going to say about me, we're getting in our own way and we're forgetting the point.
I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of something that's enduring beyond yourself. And it's not just about the individual, it's actually about the ripple that happens or the enduring nature. Because I think that's one of the things with teams is some of the decisions we make today will impact people for years to come as well. And we don't always, some leadership teams are good at factoring in the impact of their decisions and how reversible some are versus the ones that are going to have the enduring impact too. And how can they leave a positive impact on the world.
And you're having an impact every day, whether you know it or not, right? There's some research out there that suggests that you're going to impact 10,000 people in your lifetime on average, which is quite. I wish I could remember where that came from. It's quite kind of like you step in your tracks with it. It's like, really? And half the time you don't know that you're having an impact. Like, I remember years ago, I was in Melbourne and I came out of this event I'd been at. It was on a Friday night. And I came in the building and on the footpath, this woman came up to me, Digby Scott. I'm like, hello. You won't remember me. Nope. Yeah, back when I was with Arthur Anderson, the accounting firm that no longer exists, used to be the biggest in the world. I was there at the start of my career. You trained me as a graduate auditor, and we're in Canberra and we had this 2 weeks residential, and that course changed my life, and you're amazing. And wow, you set me on this path. I'm like, cool, what's your name? and now she's a partner of an accounting firm somewhere in Melbourne. And I had no clue about that. And it was lovely to hear that I'd been a contributor to her sense of success. But I wasn't doing it for that. I was doing it because I thought, at that stage of my career, I did that work because I loved it and I really wanted to train people because it was fun and I was good at it and it seemed to be helping them. But I wasn't to know that she was going to go, oh, Digby made a big difference. Yeah. And it was, I think that was like this lovely little vignette of a story around when we lead, we have to show up authentically with an intent to have an impact, but not need the people to go, oh, you're amazing, Digby. Yeah, I think it's the high intention, low attachment. There's a Zen saying I heard years ago, high intention, low attachment, that you want to have strong intent, but not be attached to needing to get that outcome.
Yeah, it's interesting. In my first book, Thriving Leaders, I shared 2 different stories of leaders that led me. And when I reached out to them to say, hey, is it okay if I share this story? Both were like, oh, I don't even remember that happening.
Yeah.
And so it goes to your point of like things that you remember that have a big impact, probably the person on the other end, depending on what it is, it was relatively insignificant for them that they haven't actually retained it or even thought about it. So it's an interesting one. As a leader, if we want to leave a lasting impact, how do we even know we're doing it?
Yeah, that's right. And I think you can't get too het up on the immediate metrics of that. It's the kind of almost like plant the tree that will be people 7 generations in the future will sit under sort of thing.
Yeah.
That implies you're taking more of a systems view and a long-term view than you are immediate gratification or feedback. You need to know. I remember talking with the MD of Chevron back in Perth when I lived there, oil and gas company, and I said, "How do you measure your own sense of success on a daily basis?" He said, "Really, really hard because I have to think in 15 to 20-year timeframes about the investment we're making and the billions of dollars we're spending to do it. It's really, really hard to know whether I've made the right call at any one time." Then he goes, "I have to come back to my values and empowering others to do amazing work." And I think one of the key skills you want to be focused on is how do I develop and empower others to lead? Not the primary job, I reckon, is to create the conditions to enable the system to thrive rather than be the hero and all of this.
Mm.
Yeah.
So you've talked a lot about the system or the ecosystem. How can leaders get a really good perspective of the systems that they are in?
Talking to someone last week, he's a chief scientist of a research organization here. And I asked him the same question. And he said, my primary job is to expose myself to all the different parts of the system. His work is to be engaging with it. And it doesn't necessarily being the one who tells them what to do. It's more to be there, to experience, to be in conversation, to join dots, to ask questions, to notice, help people work through their stuff, all of that. And through just being across the system, he can sense the system. And
Mm.
he's not doing it in a busy way. He's not like, okay, 4 o'clock, I've got to be here, 5 o'clock, I've got to be here. It's more deliberate and over time. And he builds in a lot of reflection time to go, what did I notice today? What did I see? We might not all have the ability in our leadership roles to do that as our primary thing, but what if we could make that just 10% more our role? What if we could
Mm.
make it less about being the one who's fighting the fires and solving the problems and more sitting down and trying to understand, okay, what is it, what you're doing? How does that link to this? What's the knock-on effect when you do that? And what's getting in your way? And if you can ask those sort of questions and you can see patterns across the system, I think you're going to contribute more. You're going to ask different questions. You're going to have a fresh perspective just by making, I think, part of your leadership identity one who engages and learns about the system you're in.
And I think it's like the leader's role becomes that observer. It's making me think of a lot of the stuff I
Mm.
did at Harvard last year, which was the adaptive leadership work. And a lot of that is about mobilizing systems to make progress on tough challenges.
Yeah.
And for our listeners who might be less familiar when we're talking about the system, like what is the system?
Aha. Well, I think the simplest way of thinking about a system is when you look at nature and it's looking at a plant. I'm looking out the window at the moment, so that's my metaphor. Yeah. So I'm looking at a tree over there and I could say the tree is this thing, but then it's kind of like a standalone thing. And as I look at it, I go, yeah, but it's got roots in the ground. And those roots are connected to the earth. And okay, what's the earth got in it? Well, it's got nutrients. It's got water that's come from the sky. I can see the fronds on the earth, they're moving, right? And so it's connecting to the air system. So nothing is separate. Also, it's connected to me. So by me looking at this plant, it's having an effect on me. So how far do you want to take this metaphor? What is a system? It's a interconnected group of things that have a interdependence with each other. One affects the other in a way that we can't actually necessarily predict what's going to happen next all the time. That's a complex system. But I think that probably the question that comes with that is, how do you work with a system? The Kinevin framework is, I find, very helpful here. Dave Snowden's work around this idea
Yeah.
of being able to probe, sense, and respond, he calls it, particularly with complexity. Like an organization is a complex system. A team is a complex system. You're a complex system, So try something and sense what happens and then respond to that, as opposed to try and control it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. How's that for an answer? That was kind of like top of my head.
Yeah, no, that was a great response. I think because I also really like Dave Snowden's work in the context of teams and organizations and understanding how we work together, because I do think that there's this systemic nature of teams, both the dynamic that happens within the team, but the teams that they work with as well. So your key stakeholders and how
Yeah, that's it.
everyone within the organization sort of works together, and that becomes the system. But then there's all the more tangible things like the culture or the way we get the work done and the systems and structures as well that feel a bit more tangible. They're part of the system. Like there's just so many just layers to what's actually in the system. And so for a leader, it can feel hard to influence the system as well. How do you think leaders can help influence the system to help their teams thrive?
Well, we come back to see, imagine, do. So that kind of like little cycle I was talking about. I
Mm,
think it is the seeing the system. It's how do you influence it is, I think, first by understanding it. You mentioned when you did the adaptive leadership work, be able to be an observer, not just an influencer. Because I think if you try to influence without observing first, you can get into a whole lot of trouble. And sometimes I think there's also the acceptance that perhaps there's only so much you can do to influence the system. And the better thing to do is to learn to work with it. And the metaphor I'd use there, or the analogy, is the ocean. So another thing I'm looking at right now are the waves. And a smart surfer is not going to try and influence that system called the ocean, because the power of that system is massive. I'm going to try and change the shape of a wave? No, but I can learn to work with it. I can learn to work with the currents. I can learn when the tides are at their best for the sort of waves I like to catch. And they're all analogies really for being able to go, how does this system work? And how can I work with it? And I often see aspiring change makers and leaders will come in and they'll have a crack at trying to change a system by doing a restructure of the team or their department or whatever, right? Because they can control that. And on paper, they can make some changes. But the stuff that they're not addressing is the really big systemic forces of culture, of shared history. And that stuff, you're better off understanding what that's about, observing, asking questions, noticing connections and patterns, going, oh, right, because that culture is serving something that a restructure probably won't be able to do much to change.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think I like your see, imagine, do. Like I think it's very similar to the adaptive, like observe, diagnose, act. Like
Yeah.
it's like that loop that happens.
Mm.
And I think it's also useful for leaders to call out what they're observing or diagnosing or what other team members' hypotheses are to that as well, because our interpretation of the system might be different to others' interpretations of the system. And how do we actually observe and interpret what's actually going on? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. If you can imagine, if your listeners can imagine, there's a box that's closed, right? You can't see in the box. It's a cube, and you're really keen to find out what's in the box. So what do? I'll tell you what's in the box. Okay, so don't tell anyone else, but there's a cone inside the box. It's just sitting there in the middle of the box, on the kind of the bottom of the box. It's kind of right in the middle though. You get a little tiny drill bit and you drill a hole in the top of the box, looking down. What shape would you say you saw? Would you see a circular shape or would you see a triangular shape?
Well, if it's from the top, I would see a circular
Yeah,
shape.
right. So
Yeah.
would I. And I didn't know what's in there, but I'm saying, oh, there's a circular shape. And then I get the drill and I drill a tiny little hole on one of the sides of the box and I look in and what shape would I see then?
Triangle.
Yeah. So which one's right? Which perspective is right? It's the wrong question. Hey, so your point
Yeah.
about being able to go, what are you seeing in the system? What am I seeing? That's really powerful. And there's a lot of humility in that to be able to go, look, here's what I'm experiencing. What are you experiencing? Like this bloody department over here is doing this thing, and these guys are talking about this. What's happening here? Because they look to be completely different. Can we make sense of this? That's really important sensing, seeing leadership to be able to
Yeah.
not rush to the answer.
I love the cone in the cube. I actually even have the picture of it in my book that just came out last month. So that's how much I like it, because I
Awesome.
do think it's about understanding perspectives too.
Yeah.
But I like your, like, what's the actual right question we should be asking?
Mm.
And I feel like questions, like, I'm a big believer in leaders asking more what and how questions to open up discussions and ask more questions. But you've talked about asking curious questions a lot. What's your driver for leaders to ask more questions?
Because if we don't ask the right questions, we don't discover new ways. We need to be able to ask questions that get beneath the surface to understand what's really going on. So I call them surface piercing questions. And I might just talk you through how I think about this. So I think you talked about what questions, and I think most leaders will ask two sorts of questions: what questions and what now questions. What questions like, well, what's the problem? And,
Mhm.
or what's the outcome we want? They're good questions, sure. And then they'll jump to, so what do we now do about it? and because we have this action bias, yeah. So like, okay, cool, that's the problem. Okay, that's the solution we want. So what do we do about it? Go. And we're not really getting beneath the surface of those patterns and those systems and the systemic issues. So you've got to ask, I think, before what and what now questions, you've got to ask two other ones. So step one is what? So yeah, what's the challenge we've got here?
Mhm.
The next one though is what is questions. Yes. So what is questions like? What is actually going on? What is the
Mm.
pattern at play here? What is the real thing that we're trying to make happen here? What is most important here? What is the real fear that we're not naming? They're all what is questions that are there to interrogate and understand what's actually happening. Yeah. And if we can slow down and ask some of those questions, we're going to get a much clearer picture of the cone in the box. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
I love, one of my favorite questions is, like, what is the real challenge for you? Like, as in,
Yes.
like, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's a beauty. Like, what's the real challenge? What's the story we're telling ourselves about what's happening here, and
Mm,
how true is that? That's a goodie.
mm.
So
Yeah.
you got your what is questions, and then your third set of questions. So we're going what is what if questions. So this is the blue skying, the possibility generators. We're not trying to get a Gantt charted plan out of this. We're exploring so what if we tried that? What if we had no fear? What if we only had a week to decide? Or what if we only had a day to decide what to do? What would we do? And all of these kind of unconstraining questions can really unleash some new pathways forward. Then you can get to the what now questions, which is like, okay,
Yeah.
now we've explored the territory and we've explored the sky. What do we want to do? And we've got a
Mm,
whole richer territory to play in that we can have a whole lot of different ways forward, and ideally a bunch of different energy around it. So your
mm,
question was about why do we need to ask questions? And I've just given you
mm.
more of a framework about how to do that as well.
I love it though, because I think that the what is questions really get to the stuff maybe we're not talking about, we're not willing to face yet, or is under the surface. And I think the what if questions is about the possibilities. And I think even if leadership teams or leaders one-on-one with their people ask some of these what is, what if, and what now questions, it's such an easy frame to remember
Yeah.
with your people. So thank you.
And
That's
I'll
excellent.
send you, if you want to share it with your listeners, I can send you
Yeah.
the little toolkit with it, and it's just, they can download it. It's
Amazing. We can add that to the show notes.
for sure.
Goes live. So we've talked about lasting impact. What are some small changes that people might put in place to have a lasting impact with their people?
Firstly, remember it's not about you, and invite others into the conversation and make it about us, not about you and your ideas or your vision or your responsibility. It's the shift from I to we. And so I reckon,
Yeah.
and with that means giving up some control, giving up some of the power to others, to invite them to just to take a bit of it and run with it in their own way. This is something I've really had to learn. Like, I've got a few people who work for me and with me. I actually prefer to say with me. And I remember I went away for a few weeks over winter to Europe, and one of them, I said, they had a bunch of projects they were going to run. And I said, so what input will you need from me while I'm away? And she went, none. That was a little bit confronting. And that was my ego kind of hero side of me going, hang on, I need to be needed. She said, no, we got this. Thanks for giving us all the power and trust to do it. To me, that's the big one thing. And by the way, it was awesome because so much stuff got done while I was away. It's like I didn't need to have any of that input. So that was number one. Number two would be ask more than you answer. And we've talked about questions, but what if you could make it your habit to ask questions like, I don't know, I wonder, or how might we, or what's actually happening here? And maybe that becomes your primary role. Because I reckon with learning just to be a little bit more curious a bit more often and driving for a relentless, continuous improvement, it's like, how else could we do this? That leaves responsibility more with others as well.
Yeah, I'm a big believer that I think curiosity is one of the most undervalued leadership
Yes,
capabilities that a leader could
I'm
have.
with you.
And I also particularly like how you said shifting from the I to the we, and because it's not about you, but it's also just not about them. Like, because sometimes it can
Oh,
go
yeah.
too hard the other way, and it's actually about us. So it's like about the collective.
Yes.
It's about the we, and I really like the language that you use there too.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's a good
I
shift
want
for me too.
to Yeah. I want to pick up on something you said about when you were going away and your team said, "Oh, we don't need you to come and be our hero or rescue." And you said that was a bit of a bruise to your ego. I know you talk a little bit about hero and host
Yeah.
as leader. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, like I'm embodying that, right?
Sorry,
I mean,
no.
I think they're all personas, hats that we
Yeah.
wear, right? So I talk about hero versus host, but often there's another one I put in, which is the hoper. You got the hoper, the
Yeah.
hero, and the host. And the hoper is the one that's going to go okay. And also you're almost abdicating responsibility. You're just like praying. It's like, oh, I'm not going to really do much because I'm too scared. So I'll just hope it goes okay, right? That's not really leadership. There's a spot for hope.
Sounds very passive. Yeah, it seems a very passive way to lead.
Yeah, I think hope plus action is good, but hope by itself probably isn't going to change much. The hero swings the pendulum the other way and says, well, if it's to be, it's up to me kind of thing, and moves into almost controlling. And it's about me having the answers and providing the direction. And I think behind that is this deep desire to be needed and valuable, which I think we want to not just make meaning from motion, but I think we want to be valued for often our expertise that's unique to us. And I think that's so deep, the sense of belonging that we get by being valued, people coming to us. And it's addictive. And so we can get stuck in a little bit of this hero thing. And what happens that's worst is what happened to me is the burnout. I was the bottleneck in the business. I didn't know how to delegate properly. And I didn't know how to develop others properly. So there was this kind of holding on. So it's not necessarily look at me, how awesome I am, but it's like this deep need to be needed can really get in our own way. So that's the hero. And yeah, the hero can be quiet. but they can just hold too much power. And then
Mm.
the host is the one that is, this is about the system. This is about me creating the conditions or contributing to creating the conditions. This is about knowing that I'm not here forever. I'll do my bit, but my bit needs to be about improving and sustaining what's already here. And the shift is from an egocentric mindset to an ecosystem centric mindset.
Mm.
And you can hero sometimes, that's okay. Yeah, if that's your default, I think you're not really setting things up for success. And I think,
Mm.
again, we have them, all of them in us. And I think hero comes from more of a fear-based orientation, whereas a host comes from more of a purpose-based orientation.
Mm. And I think sometimes we're a little bit conditioned. We get promoted into leadership roles because we're good at solving
Yeah,
problems and having the
that's
answer.
it.
So we keep doing that, and it disables our team from doing the work that they need to do, and we disempower them.
I've got a
And I feel like,
story about that. I was
yeah.
working with a lady who's a lawyer, and she was doing one of the leadership programs I run, and I I said to her, "Here's a question for you. If you're not paid to solve problems, what value do you add?" And it floored her. She was like, "I wouldn't even know how to answer that. Like, my whole identity as a leader," she's a really senior lawyer, and she goes, "My whole identity is as a problem solver. So if people come to
Mm.
me, I solve their problems." Like, "Well, what
Yeah.
if that wasn't what you were paid for? What would you do?" She goes, "I don't know." She goes, "So how do I add value?" So, oh, well, let's sit with that, right? And it's that kind of whole downstream thing. My job is to deal with the downstream issues, the ambulance, the bottom of the cliff stuff. Whereas what if you can
Mm.
play upstream and just set up things so those issues actually never happen in the first place? And there's a different identity. That's kind of the host thing.
Yeah. I feel like there's such an interlink with all the things you've spoken about in terms of understanding the system, leaving a lasting impact if you're a host as well.
Hmm.
So how does one be a better host? How do we dawn that? Because I know personally for me, I was a bit of a rescuer when I was leading teams. And I often talk about the shift for me was learning the skill of coaching and actually learning how to coach
Yeah,
really, really helped me
definitely.
shift in, yeah, and just help my team step up. And then likewise, I often talk a lot about leader as coach, but a leader as facilitator.
Yes.
And I feel like they're two of the fundamental capabilities of being a host. But and maybe that's just my interpretation of what you mean
No,
by
you're
host.
onto it.
But
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. How do leaders help practice some of these skills to kind of become a better
So I
host?
think there's
And
two ways of answering that. One is, what's the developmental journey for you? And this is about what's your sense of purpose? What are you here for? What's your game? What do you want to contribute to and why? And those bigger
mm,
questions about what you're here for, I think they don't get answered overnight. So I think embarking on a journey of exploring that is really important. At a skills level, I reckon there's three core skills. There's listening, there's asking, and then voicing. So
mm,
when you're in host mode, you're listening not to fix, but listening to learn. And there's a brilliant thinker, leadership expert, Jennifer Garvey Berger, who I first heard that from. That you don't want to listen to fix, you want to listen to learn. And when you're listening to fix, you're diagnosing so you can give people the answer. And that's kind of hero mindset. Whereas listening to learn is to go, what's the system? What's the pattern? How is this person wired? Let me understand. And not necessarily so I can fix anything, just so I can understand it. And they can understand too. The other part of listening is learning to listen, not just to words, but to the context that you're in that might be shaping how people show up. It's learning to listen to the direction of a conversation. Like, where is this conversation going? Is this the right conversation? Are we going deep enough? It's learning to listen to the room. Like, what's the energy in the room? And it's also learning to listen to yourself. Like, what's going on for me right now? Am I getting triggered? So
mm,
listening is such a fundamental skill. Yeah, it's just, to me, if you're learning to listen, you're slowing down and you're actually seeing what's going on. So that's number one, listening. Number
mm,
two is asking. We've talked a lot about that, so we probably don't need to go into too much detail about that. But this, like, once you've listened, then perhaps ask another question and see where that takes it, and listen again. The third one is voicing, and this is like, if asking is something coming out of your mouth with a question mark on the end, voicing is something coming out of your mouth with a full stop on the end. And it's sharing a perspective with humility. I see a triangle. How is it you're seeing a circle? It's this is what I think we most need and want for our organization, for our team, and this is why. So you're kind of staking your claim for what you believe or what you're saying, but you're doing it with a curiosity, with a wonderance, not necessarily with an arrogance. It's about being able to give feedback that's useful. We know that in coaching, right? It's one of the core skills that go with asking questions, is to tell people what you're noticing and seeing and how that's impacting you and others. I reckon listening, asking, and voicing is 3 fundamental skills to practice. We do them all the time anyway. I just don't know if we pay attention to them as much as we could.
Yeah, we have so much alignment. Well, first of all, Jennifer's coming on the podcast in
Brilliant.
2026, which is exciting. But also, I think David Clutterbuck's the person who introduced me to Listen to Learn. But one of the models in Thriving Teams is a collaboration model around listening to learn, asking curious questions, and sharing perspectives. So very, very similar to what you just talked
aligned.
about. Lots of alignment.
We
must be onto something, right? If this is something we both preach. Well, Digby, I've learnt so much, but if you could leave our listeners with one message about Thriving Teams, what would that be?
Listen, ask, and voice more deliberately.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Digby. I especially loved some of those questions around the what is, what if, and what now. I really, really loved that model. But thank you so much for your time, and I'm looking forward to sharing this with our listeners.
So good. Thanks, Claire. It's been a pleasure.
Awesome. What really stayed with me from this conversation was Digby's belief that leadership is a creative act, not a reactive one. His way of slowing the moment down, asking better questions, and noticing the system you're part of is such a powerful reframe for leaders who want to create change rather than chase it. I love the what is, what if, and what now. This is something I will definitely start using with teams and in my own coaching. For me, this episode reinforces that thriving teams are built through intention, not intensity. Thanks for listening. Thanks for joining us at the Thriving Leaders podcast. If you'd like to find out more about our leadership programs, facilitation, keynote speaking, or executive or team coaching, head to our website, www.thrivingculture.com.au. This is also where you can sign up for our newsletter, where I share useful tips on leadership and team development, as well as our podcast. You can also grab a copy of either of my books on our website, and it's also available on all good online retailers, including Audible, Spotify, and Kindle. If you like this episode, I'd be so grateful if you left a 5-star review, as it helps us reach more people and therefore helps more leaders thrive. Please subscribe.